All right, so picking back up with my reading of Deep Okayness. Let me just set a timer here, 30 minutes. So it's been a few days, so let me see. I left off where he starts explaining existential kink, talks about how how masochists relish pain, and then how we do the same thing, just like us. We love our shitty life and our inner pain. Yeah, okay. So I think this paragraph is the. Oh no. I read this one. Having is evidence of wanting, right? Because I talked about the other idea that I remember hearing years ago, where it's basically that wanting creates a distance or establishes a distance between you and the thing that you want. It's like mentally or emotionally or however you want to think of it conceptually, wanting it means that you don't have it. Wanting it means that there's a distance between you and the thing that you want. So, different kind of idea. But yeah, this one is all right. So having is evidence of wanting. So if you have it, then you probably want it. I think they can both be true. Though it's sort of paradoxical to say having is evidence of wanting, but also wanting is evidence of not having, in a sense. Yes and yes. Yeah. Admire the engineering. I mean, there's something very deep to this, right? Like, I know that less so nowadays, but I certainly in the past have been very inclined to beat myself up and think poorly of decisions I've made in the past or approaches that I've taken to life as a whole. Reflecting on past times and feeling like I made a mistake or that I regret that I did things in a certain way, or what if I had taken another path, etc. And I have friends that do the same thing. It's not uncommon, right? This is pretty dang normal. But the reason I say this is deep, admire the engineering, is you can look back at your life and the decisions you've made and how you've arrived at the place you are now in your life, and actually feel a sense of awe at the complexity of it, the awe at I don't know. I have it in my head as a sort of feeling, what I want to say, but I don't have the words. Admire the engineering. Yeah, you really have to back off from judging it, right? Admiration requires not judging it as bad. Yeah, I don't know. I'll skip trying to articulate this, but that idea hits me pretty strongly. To be like, wow, I made this. Like another example maybe is looking back on, yourself 10 years ago or however long, at a time when maybe you don't think that you were making the best decisions of your life, or maybe you made the decision to go down a path that you don't necessarily appreciate having gone down. And you can look back at yourself or imagine that person, that younger version of you, is another person, right? That it's not a young version of you, but it's just a young person who's going through life and trying to make decisions to the best of their ability. And just wonder how might you deal with such a person. Maybe imagine that younger version of you is your own child, or maybe imagine that it's a younger sibling or a cousin or something like that. And just as an experiment, see how does that shift the way that you feel towards them, and how does that shift how you would talk to them about what's going on. Because maybe, some of us are so self-critical that if we imagine it as ourselves, it's very easy to just say like, oh, that was stupid, you should have done this other thing. What were you thinking? But when it's someone else, we're able to be more kind and empathetic. And be like, wow, that was a really courageous decision. You have a lot on your plate right now. I'm really amazed and impressed with how well you're handling it all. Like, you might not say that to yourself because of our tendency to beat ourselves up, but you might say that to someone else. And so, to shift from saying it only to other people and start saying that sort of thing to yourself, it can be pretty powerful. I don't know, I'm just riffing on Sasha's ideas here, trying to think through it for myself and make sense of it. Okay. Moving on. I like this. It's very much this work in action, in the sense of I'm going through Joe Hudson's connection course right now, and there was one exercise in a recent call or a recent practice session where I forget exactly what it was. It might have been that we just kind of openly stated our judgments of the partner we were working with, or we were just calling out our own insecurities or something. But then after every single time, we'd have to follow that with saying, and that's okay. And that's not unique to Joe Hudson's method, nor is it unique to existential kink. But just this taking this attitude of like, it is what it is, and that's okay. Like, I feel mad, and that's okay. I feel despair, and that's okay. Whatever you're experiencing is okay. And what shifts when you do that can be pretty profound. Because in a sense, you're shifting from being critical or applying shame to just being supportive. It's not wrong that you're feeling the way you are. You're not making a mistake to feel the way you are. You're feeling the way you are, and that's okay. You're thinking what you're thinking, and that's okay. That's how things are. Just as I say that, I'm realizing that could be explained so much more in depth, the power of taking that approach. So I'm curious to see if Sasha does that. And if he doesn't, I definitely want to try do it for myself, because I'm unsatisfied with my own explanation there. Interesting that he's saying it's just a narrative framework. I'm pretty sure that's the first time he's used that term, narrative. This sentence is kind of confusing in the sense that I don't know what he's comparing it to. As far as narrative frameworks go, I mean, I don't know, what's another... Are we supposed to have some other narrative frameworks in mind that are not powerful? Or, I'm not sure. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now we're getting into the meat of his own experience. EK centers around a meditation exercise. Again, I have not read this book, so maybe I'll want to after this article. You might hate it, but you certainly won't find it boring. Some people say that being boring is the number one sin in copywriting, at least. But I've always wondered what's the actual effect on somebody who is boring or whose writing is boring, and then telling them not to be boring. I don't know that it helps them. Just like telling someone who's overthinking not to overthink. It's like, well, that doesn't help me not do it. Definitely relate to this. I don't know about the every 5 minutes thing. That feels like a playful exaggeration. But nonetheless, yeah. Advancing into the world and then running away in shame. I mean, I've been talking to a friend about the idea of stepping out of one's comfort zone. And for me, when I think about comfort zones, I am very careful about stepping outside of them because I've had many experiences and phases of life where I got so sick of staying inside my comfort zone that I flipped around and took the opposite approach where I just tried to like blast through and exist outside of my comfort zone all the time. And yeah, the repercussion of that was, quoting Sasha, immediately afterwards, running away in shame. I mean, not necessarily in shame, but just having exposed myself so much by being outside of my comfort zone, doing things that were scary, experiencing fear and all this stuff. The rebound effect was running back to safety, right? The further you go out of your comfort zone, the more you put yourself in a scary situation, the more likely you're going to need some kind of recovery period. And emotionally, that means finding some way to feel safe. What that looks like in terms of actual behavior is going to be different for everyone. But if you challenge yourself and you push yourself and you blast through and even ignore fears because you're frustrated by feeling the fear, very likely that there will be a rebound effect. So, all that to say, when it comes to comfort zones, I'm now very careful and slow and deliberate about going outside of them because I don't want to have like this exciting high of an experience, but then have a period of just completely hiding away. Yep. I think the sentence is about to be something that I feel like I could have written myself. Yep. 100%. I mean, I'm kind of in that phase right now. I have not really touched Twitter in basically a month. Maybe more than a month at this point. Shit. Longer than I realized. Because, yeah, I guess I felt overexposed and it feels a lot safer and more peaceful right now to just not have to engage there. That's a heavy thing to say. To disturb the world with my presence. Yeah. I went from thinking I was unspeakably brilliant to thinking I wasn't worthy of oxygen. Been there. This is a really hard thing to do. It's really hard. I've been doing it more and more lately, but in fits and starts. There's so many sneaky ways that I certainly can come up with to avoid feeling any of these things. The engineering of that is pretty impressive. The engineering of whatever, my mind, my psychology, and my emotions and my behavior, such that I'm able to like so understand and predict that if I'm alone with my thoughts, I will feel these things like nausea and pain and whatnot. That various ideas for ways to distract myself bubble up before I even realize what they are. I was talking to a friend just the other day and realizing that in a lot of ways, my own curiosity, intellectual curiosity, is a version of that. Like, I will get so obsessed with some idea or some topic and run away with it, go down the rabbit hole. But in retrospect, oftentimes it's like, wow, I was feeling very lonely at the time, or I was feeling a lot of anxiety about something looming in my future. And by getting all obsessed and curious about this thing, I totally was able to like escape having to feel any of that. And it's so hard to catch on the front end. Anyway, let's go back to this article. And I thought, that's so fun. All right, so I'm interested in how he was able to do that. Because it's one thing to say, enjoy it, and another thing to actually be able to, It's like, it's one thing to say, just let it go, man. And then a totally different thing to actually know how the hell to do that. I appreciate that he, as such a good writer, is comfortable starting an entire paragraph with the word like followed by a comma. Look at that. Slake my lust. What a sexy 3 words combination. I don't know. Maybe it's not sexy. It's something. Sensuous in a way. Ingenious. Yeah. Seriously. We might not want it to happen exactly, but it is damn ingenious. Misunderstood artist. Ooh, yeah. Remain forever unknowable, unredeemable, distant, separate, but still yeah. Ouch, man. I feel called out. It's interesting to consider how popular this article was. I guess all of this stuff really resonated for people. I wonder what the comments are like down at the bottom. I want to read that, actually. I'm going to open it for next time. Or for some other time. This is really cool. I feel like more people should talk about this. Maybe people do talk about this, but that you can have these experiences without the drugs. And I'm not gonna like bash using drugs, but you can get a long way without them. Ugly parts of my self-conception. The first thing that came to mind was the IFS term or concept of burdens. Yeah, it's not the part that is ugly or bad or whatever, or unhelpful. It's the burden. It's the idea, or the sort of trauma, to use a very loose word. And you can help your parts unburden and let go of that thing that they're carrying, that thing that's weighing down on them, and let it fall off in that sense. That was quite a passage. So many metaphors, trying to describe this emotional, like intensely emotional and somatic experience. So many metaphors come into play. And considering that I try to do this every day, like trying to verbalize what I'm feeling, I don't think, or I wouldn't assume that Sasha's use of metaphors here is purely for the sake of writing, but rather that this often is what you end up doing when you try to describe your experience like that. You end up using metaphors because it's so hard to grasp and pinpoint some of these feelings, right? It's like I was having this other kind of experience that I can describe in that way. Like, obviously he's not doing exactly that, but that visual makes the experience more legible. An inner glow, right? Like, glow is light, but this says nothing about the actual, like, concrete physical experience. An inner glow crept, right? Like, was it heat starting on one side of your chest and going across? Like, I don't know. I just think this is really nice. So well done. This description of something that's so hard to put into words. I had this experience after spending several hours in an art museum. Not that it's the same thing, but when I walked out, the whole world seemed more beautiful in a very dramatic way. The shadow work worldview. Is that what it is? A whole worldview? I guess so. There's a lot of premises that people who do shadow work adopt that a lot of other people don't. Once I embraced my shadow, it was less consuming. I want to call back to something I said in my video exploring non-coercion, where there was a tweet that said something like, coercion creates extra work. Yeah, so I'll finish after I say this. So I think my tweet said basically, coercion creates extra work. And I think this is saying very much the same thing. Right? Coercing yourself, or coercing parts of yourself, is like the opposite relationship to your insides as embracing it. And as he's saying, the more you embrace it, the less it consumes you, right? And being consumed by it is like being utterly overtaken by it. Like, you're thinking about it, you're feeling it, you're constantly battling it, right? There's energy and time devoted to, devoted to that experience. But if you embrace it, you suddenly have to devote less energy. All right, I'm just going to finish this paragraph. Less terror at being seen. Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing I've been thinking about a lot, is like, what are the actual obstacles that so many of us face around like writing more, and in particular writing more in public, or publishing it in public places, whether that's on Twitter or a blog or on YouTube or whatever. And, you can talk about resistance, as in the war of art, or you talk about writer's block or whatever, or you could go the direction of saying, like, I just don't have the right strategy, I don't have the right approach, I don't know the right techniques, like, I need to learn more about the technicalities of writing, and then I can have an easier time writing. But I think, in my opinion, at least how I'm thinking about it now, is it really comes down to feeling more safe. If you feel totally unsafe about putting yourself out there and putting out your ideas in front of people, then writing is going to be fucking hard. And it's going to be terrifying to imagine putting your words out there in front of other people for them to, possibly judge. And there's such a strong connection between the words that we write and how we feel about ourselves. Those words so often feel like representations of us. They feel like parts of us. And so to put that out there in front of people and allow people to comment on it and judge it, yeah, that's really vulnerable. So kind of going back to what I was saying about comfort zones, like, if you aren't careful and you put so much of yourself out there before you're ready, or before like taking note of how it actually feels to do, you're liable to get whacked by that impulse to then feel safe. However that shows up for you, it might be going off Twitter, like it sometimes is for me, or it might be doing drugs, or it might be, eating a lot, distracting yourself with food, as it also has been for me at times. I really, really appreciate so far in this article how not audacious Sasha is in many ways. In certain ways, he's super bold, as I spent a previous video saying over and over and over again. But at the same time, he doesn't overpromise, you know? He's not saying everything was solved, just that it got a little bit better. And that is a good thing. Like, getting a little bit better is worth celebrating. And that's what this entire article is about. It's like worth celebrating that you can get a little bit better. And that's great. You know, you don't need to just transform into perfection in order to celebrate. Gently disarmed. That's really nice. Okay, so I'll end it here.